Scarute pantes, ego imi Jacobos dinaldides, que tutestinto bibliomu. We are back, and today I want to talk to you about my new book called Troίάν Πόλεμος. This is a Greek novella that I have put together. I've translated and adapted it from a Latin novella, Bellum Troianum, by my friend Brian Gronweller. And in today's video, I want to talk a little bit about what the book is, why you should buy it, and the process of putting it together. So firstly, what is this book? It's a novella. It's a short story of about 5,000 words. And you can see it's not very thick. It's a pretty easy read, relatively speaking. It's not really the first thing you should read if you're learning ancient Greek, yet every word in this book is glossed. So there's a glossary at the back, a lexicon, and it contains every word glossed in context. So if you look up a word, it will tell you in context what that word means with an English gloss. So in theory, as long as you could read Greek letters, you could work your way through this whole book. It's that well equipped for a beginner. But I don't recommend, if you're a beginner in ancient Greek, this is not the place you should start. It's a place where if you've done some Greek, you've learned some basics, you can pick up a book and with the helps in it, you can work through and read this book. Because if you are learning ancient Greek, what you need is more and more comprehensible input. And so the best time to read this book is at a stage where you can pick it up and read most of the page and understand it. The story follows the course of the Trojan War, mostly following the Iliad, but also kind of following some of the other legends and myths associated with that. The Trojan horse is in here, that's why it's on the cover. And it is a fairly straightforward translation from the Latin. I wanted to base it closely on what Brian had already done, and that gave me a good guide for what was to be done for the Greek. At the same time, I've tried to write good, comprehensible Greek. Simple enough to understand, but not so simple that it's not Greek in feel. It should feel Greek, even if at some points there's a lot of redundancy, a lot of repetition that you wouldn't find in a Greek text written for a native speaker or a high-level reader. At the bottom of each page, you'll find key glosses for that page, especially expressions or words that are less familiar, just to help you along if you're someone who can read Greek but needs a little bit of help on that page itself. There's illustrations that come from the original version with some slight adaptation for the Greek. And really, I think if you are someone who's done a semester of Greek, you've done a bit of Greek study, you've started to encounter the different cases, you have a little bit of knowledge of participles, this book could be for you. And if not, you should buy it anyway, put it on your shelf until you are ready for it. My hope is that this will be the first of many books to come, not just by me, but by other authors. There are a number of novellas on the market, not many though, there's more coming. I've read and proofread some of the ones that already are out there, and not all novellas are created equal. The ones I've read certainly are quite impressive, at least the ones I helped kind of proof and edit. But I have read some things out there by people who probably don't quite have the experience to put together a Greek text that I could recommend people read. I won't name names, you can find these products for yourself, but I've definitely read things and seen samples and gone, that's not good Greek. It's not just bad stylistically, but it has errors that aren't going to help people in the long run. And of course, there's probably some errors in my book, let's be honest. There's a review process that Brian works through, getting external readers. I think that's very important for novellas in Greek and Latin, to have people with experience in Greek or Latin picking up your book, looking through it, going, that doesn't seem right, there's a mistake, here's something that needs to be changed, because there's a level of accuracy that we need. I know there's bigger debates about Latinitas and what is good Greek and those kinds of things. They're important to have, but there does need to be a minimum standard at which we say, you know what, this isn't right, this isn't helpful, this isn't helping people more broadly develop their skills because it's just ungrammatical. And so that's what we want to avoid in the process of developing good resources for Greek learners. And so let me talk a little bit about the process of putting this together. Really, Brian approached me about 2 years ago and said, Seamus, do you want to do this project? People have recommended you to me. I knew Brian through patristic interactions, and I was excited. I'm excited by the concept, but I wanted to really pick some low-hanging fruit to begin with. And so that's why it's a translation of something that already exists. Because the Latin version tells the story of the Trojan War, which is really coming out of Greek literature, it seems straightforward to go, a Latin version of a Greek story? Surely a Greek version of that would make perfect sense. And I think that's one reason why it's accessible and relatively easy to do. Secondly, the text itself was not too difficult to work with. It wasn't at a very high level, but also wasn't at a very basic level. In some ways, a more elementary or introductory reader is more challenging to write because you're trying to be more restricted. And so when you're trying to be more restricted, it forces you to use constructions that seem less natural. But with a bit more freedom, you can express things in a more kind of Greek way. And I think this volume fits well in that range, in the elementary mid-range. And so I got the Latin text and I worked through, and it was really an interesting process for me. Some things that are very straightforward in Latin are not straightforward in Greek. Some expressions that readily come to mind or can read off the page and immediately understand them in Latin. In Greek, I was left wondering, how do we say that? Or what is the expression? What is the verb for this concept? To give just one example, the Latin version of ho epi Tροίάν Πόλεμος uses the verb love relatively freely to talk about certain relationships. And in Latin, there's a straightforward verb to go for, amor, amare, and any reader of Latin can pick that up and has probably encountered that verb and knows how to use it. When you come over to Greek, though, there's a number of words for love, and there's a number of ways to express different things, and I thought to myself, what is the best way to express the relationships and the feelings that happen among the characters in the text? Because I didn't think it was a straightforward mapping of one verb to another verb. And so I did some thinking. I went away and looked at some expressions, and I came up with a number of expressions drawing from Greek lexicons and then also Greek usage to say, here is what I think is going on in the text. Here is what is a good Greek expression for this. Let's put it on the page. Let's give a footnote and a gloss to explain what's happening for people who aren't familiar with it. And let's teach this. Similarly, just with hitting and missing. Greek has different ways of expressing hitting objects with arrows, with weapons, that Latin doesn't have. Latin has a much more straightforward way, in my mind, that I was familiar with. Greek uses different structures that don't necessarily map to what you might expect if you're coming from Latin. And so that process was really informative, educational for me. It expanded my Greek, forced me to think hard about things. And so it did take a while to put the text together, working in starts and stops. But I was very excited once it was done, sent it off to some reviewers that Brian had lined up. Thank you very much, reviewers. You're probably watching this. And that process itself was invaluable. To have people read it and say, what about this? Or I think this. And a number of people picked up quite different things. Some people picked up some fundamental spelling mistakes that I'd made, which would have been horrifying if they'd made it to print. Other people pointed out some grammatical features that I hadn't considered. Other people pointed out things where they asked questions or said, is this a bit more of a koine thing or an attic thing, or what's happening here, where I was forced at the very least to go away and think about and research that and come back with my own answer. Even if I didn't change the text, I expanded my understanding of the language. And if anybody else comes back to me with those questions, I'll have an answer for them. The final part of the process involved putting together the lexicon at the back. And again, this was both a helpful step in preparing the novella, but also a learning experience. As you compile all the words in the text, a couple of spelling variations and interesting features start to arise, and you go, I made some mistakes here, or why did I do that? Or why did I use one verb here and then later in the book I used a different verb? And so there's a process of refining that goes on there, and a process of what's the best expression for each thing here? Can we simplify and use the same expression in a number of places? And how do we put together a text that is less complicated for readers than a text not designed for learners? And so all the stages of this process were helpful for me as a teacher and as a learner of ancient Greek. And I think the product that we've put together is really a great one. I mean, I'm proud of this, and I'm excited to see it out there, and I'm excited for you to pick it up, read it, let me know what you think. I'm really also excited for the future of Greek publishing. I can see that there's a number of other works on the market, but I'm working away at some other things, and I think there'll be some other Greek novellas coming in the future, not just from me, but from others. You'll just need to stay tuned to see what I can bring to the table next. Well, thanks again for tuning in. Thanks again for watching. Make sure to, if you've picked up or Tροίάν Πόλεμος, leave me a comment here or send me an email, whatever. I would love to hear from you about your experience with the book and how you found it and how you're using it.